Afternoon, everyone, and thanks for attending. It's a pleasure to be here in front of the folks from HESNI again. And as was said, we're going to be talking about how you can develop an energy management process or master plan for your hospital or healthcare system. And I think Rachel has said enough about me. I think some of you may know me, so I'm not going to spend any time. I do want to state that I'm going to be covering a lot of material today. I have a lot of slides and I'm going to be moving pretty fast, but no need to worry. I will be providing a PDF of my slides to the chapter and they'll be available to you. So there's no need to try and write everything down. And if you are unsuccessful in getting those slides through HESNI, you should have them that way, but I'm always happy to send my slide deck to anybody that asks. So I just want to add that in. So with that, away we go. What we're going to talk about today, we're going to focus on this process more than the nuts and bolts, and also the why we need to reduce our energy consumption and carbon emissions. And the why and the kind of the how-to, the process piece, are important for you, kind of bullets in your gun to help you sell this upstream to your management and the C-suite, the guys that approve the projects and allocate the money. So we're going to talk about why we need to reduce our energy consumption, how conversations surrounding energy efficiency are changing. And I'm going to spend a lot of time the rest of the presentation on this 14-step process. And we'll talk about the high return on investment of energy efficiency measures, some benchmarking discussion, retro and monitoring-based commissioning and retrofit options. We're going to talk about integrating energy efficiency with your capital planning, new construction, and purchasing, how to leverage utility incentives and rebates, and I'll touch on some alternative financing options for energy efficiency and renewable energy projects. So, as some of you may know, I've been working in the healthcare sector and helping area hospitals reduce their energy use for more than 40 years. I'm an old guy. And during most of that time, these efforts have focused on finding projects with short paybacks. And there are a lot of those projects. They've been and still are. But during the past 2 years, especially, these discussions have really changed dramatically. And, with everybody working from remote and things like that, you may not be aware of that, but there's much more focus on reducing carbon emissions and electrifying buildings rather than just energy efficiency. And our evolving discussions with our healthcare clients are more surrounding carbon reduction plans than just energy efficiency plans, although energy efficiency is a big part of that. A lot of big healthcare systems are pursuing getting 100% of their electricity supplied from renewable sources. I'll touch on that more later. And we're seeing a lot more interest in water conservation and other sustainability initiatives, and not just energy. So what's driving this change to the energy efficiency narrative? Well, for starters, let's look at this statement. If we don't reduce or don't achieve a 45 to 50% reduction in total global carbon emissions by 2030, that's close, that's soon, we will have lost the opportunity to meet the 1.5 to 2 degrees C warming threshold. And that's important because that's where the impacts of climate change will become irreversible. So there's a lot of urgency to meet those big targets. And the Biden administration has set a carbon reduction target of 50 to 52% by 2030. And I'm going to talk about that being from a 2005 baseline, and net zero carbon by 2050, which is a long way off. So when you see those long-term goals, treat those with a grain of salt. What else is driving this changing narrative? Well, there's a new SEC regulation that's out for public review and comment that is going to treat these ESG metrics as fiduciary data. And what that means, fiduciary data is like financial data. So if a public company misreports their financial data, get in a lot of trouble, and may even be charged with a criminal charge of fraud if it's done intentionally. And so your ESG metrics are now going to be treated just the same way as that financial data. So a lot more scrutiny, a lot more requirements for accuracy, and treating that much like your financial data. So we're seeing a changing landscape on the corporate side. That doesn't impact most of the nonprofit hospitals as much, but it's really changing the landscape out in the private sector. And a lot of the largest companies like Amazon and Walmart are requiring their suppliers to make significant emissions reductions, and that's their scope 2 and 3 emissions. And we're doing a lot of projects for one client in particular who does a lot of work with Amazon and Walmart, and they're being required to reduce emissions. So we're doing fuel cells, we're doing photovoltaics, a lot of projects to reduce emissions solely driven by pressure from their clients, which are these big companies. And again, doesn't impact hospitals, but it does impact the overall momentum. One thing that will impact hospitals and is impacting them in several cities where they have enacted what's called a Building Performance Ordinance, or BEPS ordinance. And this impacts the facilities there, including hospitals, by imparting big financial penalties for poor energy efficiency. So while no one should underplay how much change needs to occur to reduce these carbon emissions by 50% in the next decade, it's also important not to overplay the difficulty of getting there. We don't want to declare it it's too hard and we'll just give up. These reductions can actually be met with existing technologies that are tried and true. And while it's ambitious, it's really not something that's going to turn people's world upside down. And for starters, a lot of work has already been done, as listed on this slide. A lot of these targets are towards that 2005 baseline. So we've basically spent the last decade bringing forth technologies to decarbonize our power sector, our vehicles, and our light trucking. And I should add that just retiring the remainder of the US coal plants would account for nearly 1 billion annual tons of carbon emissions, or almost 17% of the total 2019 US greenhouse gas emissions. And most of these old coal plants are nearing the end of their lives and will have to be replaced regardless. So we know that wind and photovoltaics are now the cheapest new capacity to install. So we expect a lot of progress. And companies like Ford, they're electrifying the F-150 pickup truck. That's the largest selling vehicle in the US. So you're going to see a lot on the cars and light trucks coming very soon. So what can we do to help move this forward? Well, today we're going to focus on reducing energy use in buildings. And buildings are important because they account for 38% of the US energy use. It's the largest segment in our economy. You can see from the pie chart that buildings account for more than transportation, all transportation, which is cars, trucks, trains, jets, and more than industry, which is 32%. And hospitals, we want to focus on hospitals because they're one of the most energy intensive facilities. They use 3 times more energy per square foot than a typical office building. And that's due to the 24/7 occupancy, the demands for high airflow and filtration. And there's lots and lots of energy consuming equipment, MRIs, PET scans. Every doctor walks around the hospital with a tablet instead of a clipboard nowadays. So a lot of electronic equipment. And to give you some appreciation for the scale of the energy use of hospitals, if the US healthcare system were a country, it would rank 13th in the world for greenhouse gas emissions. It's a lot. And the EPA estimates that the US healthcare sector's current emissions from electricity use contributes $600 million per year to healthcare costs, and that's for increased asthma and other respiratory illnesses. So we're in the business of trying to make people better, not sicker. So in addition to reducing our operating costs and our carbon footprint, we can help contribute to our base mission of do no harm and make people healthier by reducing our energy use. And again, another good point to bring up when you have your discussions with the C-suite. To make the dramatic changes needed in the short time frame we have, we really need to take a different approach. And I call this moving from carrots to sticks. So as an example, we're in the 14th year of the ComEd incentive program. And we do work across the country. And the ComEd program is arguably one of the most comprehensive and generous programs in the United States. And that's also true of the gas programs from People's Gas. And yet, despite these generous incentives, we still haven't made the deep cuts needed to fend off the dramatic changes coming from climate change. And that's where we're going to see more mandatory laws, like New York City's Local Law 97. That was the first BEPS ordinance that was enacted in New York City in 2019. Requires mandatory cuts in energy use, or the facilities will face large fines, or as I call it, sticks, if they don't meet those targets. After New York City, St. Louis, Washington, D.C., and Boston have enacted their own energy performance legislation. And a lot of other cities, including Chicago, are contemplating following suit. So you can use that link there to go and see Biden's national BEPS coalition. And Chicago has signed up. And will Chicago or your city implement a BEPS ordinance? Well, we don't know that for sure, but it's best to have a plan just in case. So as we approach these issues, conservation is just a start. We really need to approach it where we're decarbonizing our facilities. And that starts by lowering our total energy usage as much as possible through conservation measures, and that's today's main topic. But we also want to consider fuel switching opportunities wherever possible. And basically, we want to look for chances to electrify everything. We want to look at both on-site and off-site renewable energy for electric power. And as you get to that point where you're evaluating these renewables, you're going to find that if you cover all your roofs and all your parking structures and parking lots with photovoltaics, you're probably only going to get about 5 to 10% of your electricity usage. So you're going to have to really look at some off-site renewables as well. And as we incorporate all these decarbonizing projects, we also want to start incorporating some resiliency features into our facilities in anticipation of the changes coming due to climate change. And they're really going to impact our facilities in many ways. Much hotter weather, as we're seeing across the country, higher wet bulb temperatures for extended periods of time. We don't face the hurricanes and wildfires as they do on the two coasts, but these are opportunities to also incorporate some resiliency features. So how do we move forward? Well, let's look at the results of a recent benchmarking survey from ASHRAE. Energy represents more than half the healthcare facility budget, and that's more than staffing, more than materials, and service contracts all combined. So reducing energy costs by 5% has the same impact on the bottom line as cutting staff by 10%. So as we upsell our programs and our initiatives, we want to sell the financial case, and we want to address risk concerns as well, because as you get above the facilities department, you're mainly dealing with financial people. So these are important things to consider. We want to sell the opportunity. Again, you're working with people who are more comfortable with numbers and finances. So the opportunity is if we reduce our energy costs by $100,000, that's the same impact on the bottom line as $2 million in new revenues. And that assumes your hospital is getting a 5% return on sales. Most hospitals are not getting 5%. They're somewhere less than that. So the multiplier would be even greater. And that's borne out by research by the EPA that shows that hospitals that implement a robust energy conservation program outperform competing hospitals by as much as 10% in net operating income. And you want to address the risk concerns. A lot of CFOs, COOs, they're not familiar with energy efficiency. And they say, well, what if it doesn't work? You're basically sitting in most hospitals, you're sitting on a lot of money in an endowment fund. We found out during 2008 and 2009 that stocks and bonds are not a sure thing, and even real estate tanked. And so those are not safe investments. Energy efficiency measures, on the other hand, are very low risk investments. You're using readily available, proven off-the-shelf technology already installed in hundreds of other hospitals. And as energy prices go up, your savings will increase. So look at gas prices today versus where they were a few years ago. So that's what you can point to. Your savings will just increase over time. And as we move our initiative and our program forward, the most successful energy efficiency and sustainability programs are process-based instead of project-based. And what do I mean by that? Well, typically a facility will go and pursue a project. It'll be, let's do a lighting project or a control system upgrade or a burner project, and they'll go and chase the project. They'll submit it for funding. They'll get the funds. They'll get it implemented, track the results, and then they're done. And you can lose momentum doing that. So this was Edwards Deming who taught the Japanese the continuous improvement process. And that's how we want to look at energy management and sustainability. It is a continuous improvement process rather than a series of individual projects. And as we move forward, we want to start out, we want to develop a baseline. So if you're not already tracking your energy use, you want to do that, develop a baseline, and then perhaps shoot for an easy, quick win. We can do steam trap upgrades that pay back really in a matter of weeks. Retro commissioning often pays back in months. The average, we've retro commissioned over 30 hospitals in ComEd territory. The average payback is just under 6 months. Lighting projects usually pay back in 1 or 2 years. That's changing from fluorescents to LEDs. So these are quick wins. You can build some momentum by going after what I call the low-hanging fruit. So what results will we get from that? Well, the implementing the low-hanging fruit will usually reduce your energy use by somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 to 10%. The average results from the ComEd retro commissioning efforts averaged about 6%, and then you add the traps and maybe some lighting projects, and you can get up to about 10%. If you look at aggregating the remaining longer payback, larger capital cost items and implement all those items that all those measures that have an aggregate payback of 7 years, and that's a 14% return on investment. You can get to about a 20 to 25% reduction. Further reductions can be gained by implementing a more comprehensive process, and you can really get to a long-term reduction in the neighborhood of 30 to 50%. And I'm going to cover that comprehensive process next. But that'll get you halfway. To further decarbonize, that's going to require electrification of your building infrastructure, coupled with some combination of on-site and off-site renewables. So what is the comprehensive plan or master plan? Well, we've got to start off with utility tracking. We got to know where we're starting. Then we can, once we have that baseline established, we can benchmark our results against other sites. We're going to talk about optimizing our energy purchases, looking for low and no cost operation and maintenance savings, retro commissioning and monitoring based commissioning, retrofit of existing buildings, incorporating building infrastructure into the planning process. We want to make sure that our new construction is energy efficient, our renovations. We want to incorporate life cycle costing into the equipment purchasing policies. And then look for fuel switching opportunities to reduce our carbon emissions and electrify where we can. And then again, looking for off-site and on-site renewables, maximizing our grant and rebate opportunities. And then we'll look at some recognition opportunities and alternative financing options. So I'm going to cover each of these bullet points as we go through. First step, establish an accurate baseline and tracking system. That's really essential, and you may want to consider setting up an energy dashboard, and you can tie that to your BAS to generate reports. If you're still taking and chasing down the paper bills from accounts payable and then entering those into a spreadsheet, you should consider using an automated service like Urginet, and that goes and scrapes the bills and automatically downloads all the data into a database or an Excel spreadsheet. So that avoids all the clerical errors from data inputting and gets you out of the data entry business and chasing people down for that data. Much more efficient. Once we have that baseline, we want to know if we're, where do we stand relative to other hospitals? Well, if you're driving a car that gets 10 miles per gallon, we know that's bad. But what if your hospital is using 350,000 BTUs per square foot per year? Is that good or is that bad? Well, we don't know, so we want to look at some benchmarking tools. So what's out there? Most hospitals, their go-to option is the EPA's Energy Star program. That's the most commonly used benchmarking tool across the entire country. Some of you have also seen our firm's annual energy and water benchmarking survey. We've done that every year since 1995. Gives you a little bit more granular data. It looks at water and carbon emissions and also at costs. That link right there will take you to the results of our last survey. If you want to participate in that, it's no cost. You can also participate in Practice Greenhouse benchmarking survey. Well, Energy Star is, as I mentioned, the most commonly used. You put your data in and you receive a percentile rank, which tells if you're good or bad. So basically a score of 50 means you're just average. Above 50, you're above average, and below 50, obviously not there. And a rank of 75 and above can get you an Energy Star label for your hospital. Should add that the results are only partly normalized for weather, and you can also use a lot of other things like LEED. Use the Energy Star data as a starting point. Again, some of you may have seen our benchmarking survey. We track fossil fuel energy use and cost, electric use and cost, total use and cost on a per square foot basis. This is the total energy consumption in BTUs. Every one of these little numbers across here is a code number for a different hospital facility. So you can see where your facility ranks, and then we give data on who has absorbers and electric heat and things like that that are out there. Here's total energy costs. You can see a lot of variation in terms of dollars per square foot. We track water consumption and water cost, and carbon emissions, and that's based on where you're located. So hospitals in our region here, a lot of their electricity use is nuclear. If I was across the border in Indiana, much more coal, so wouldn't look so good on their carbon emissions in Indiana. You want to optimize the energy purchases, and this is often ignored, but it helps to do that because there are a lot of variations, and you can use our benchmarking data as you're doing this. Here is the unit costs of dollars per therm in our benchmarking survey. We looked at a group of hospitals recently, and they had 4 of their hospitals were over here with very high dollars per therm, and they had outsourced their energy purchases. And I think if they had been in the middle here, they would have saved $500,000 a year. So you have some basis for evaluating whether or not you're getting a good deal on your gas and your electricity. And there are a lot of variations. You'll see that hospitals in the city of Chicago will have slightly higher costs for gas and electricity due to taxes. They pay city tax, county tax, and state tax. And if you're outside of Cook County, it'll be a little lower. We want to look for operations and maintenance savings. So dirty heat transfer surfaces, load shedding opportunities, traps we talked about, and lots of training. Building operations have a big impact on the energy efficiency of your facility. And having someone override a set point or an operating schedule can have big impacts. So we want to make sure we spend money on training. We want to look at retro commissioning, which about half of the savings from retro commissioning comes from making controls changes, temperature resets, static pressure resets, changes to your economizer to optimize that. The other half comes from all the broken parts and pieces that we find, valves leaking through, dampers that aren't working properly. And again, you can get, maybe a 3 to 6% savings by implementing retro commissioning in your facility. And in addition to retro commissioning, you may want to consider implementing a monitoring-based commissioning platform, and that helps your savings persist over time, and may actually help to deliver a deeper dive in the retro commissioning process and find additional savings. So our firm has been implementing that pretty much universally on retro commissioning assignments that we're doing these days. There are lots of different providers of monitoring-based commissioning platforms. Our firm's probably worked with 8 or 9 different platforms. And we want to look at retrofitting your existing buildings, building systems and equipment. It's likely that 70 to 80% of the hospital buildings that will exist in 20 years already exist. And bringing these older, less efficient buildings up to par does need to be a key aspect of your program. And so Commonwealth Edison and the gas companies have programs that can help fund these some studies as well as the implementation of efficiency measures. And so where do these retrofit opportunities come? Well, we typically look at lighting, we look at the central heating and cooling plants, we look at the HVAC systems. There are sometimes opportunities in the plumbing and process equipment, and then in demand response. And as I mentioned, you know, if you implement all the measures with an aggregate payback of 7 years, that's a 14% ROI. You can usually get to about 20 to 30% savings. And again, if you go further and implement this comprehensive plan, you can get a little further in the range of 30 to 50%. So what kind of lighting measures do we look for? Well, the most obvious and what everybody's looking for is converting everything to LEDs. So that's not just your 4-foot lamps, but exit signs, surgical lights. Have you converted all your surgical lights to LEDs yet? You should, for a lot of reasons. Outdoor parking structures are good opportunities for converting sodium or mercury vapor lamps to LED source, task lighting, and even your signage and elevators. But beyond that, you want to look at some lighting controls, and that can be occupancy sensors. We put those on in stairwells. You can buy stairwell light fixtures that have occupancy sensors built in, reduce light levels during an occupancy. One hospital I know of has installed a quiet time program in their patient corridors to lower lighting levels during the middle of the day. And we can look at photo cells on outdoor lighting. And for perimeter areas, we can look at dimming for, they call that daylighting as another option. We can go to our heating plants and do the obvious things. We can repair damaged and missing insulation, repair and replace steam traps, eliminate leaks and condensate dumping. When I do an energy audit, first thing I do is drive around the perimeter of the hospital and I look for steam coming out the vent from the condensate receiver. And that means I have traps that are leaking through. So that's easier to see in the winter, but generally I drive around the hospital and then I get to a high point on the roof and I look for those steam plumes. You can do the same thing. You can look at burner tuning and replacements, blow down heat recovery, which also saves a lot of water. Stack economizers and de-aerator vent heat recovery can help you recover heat for makeup water, feed water, and domestic hot water. A lot of facilities are looking at condensing hot water boilers for heating. You can use reverse osmosis systems for boiler makeup, and then your blowdown goes down to next to nothing. Reduce your steam pressure, and you can also meter your boiler makeup and blowdown and deduct that from your sewer bill. Cooling plants, again, there are lots and lots of opportunities using year-round process cooling for process loads, automatic reset of chilled water and condenser water temperatures, and pressure differential on your chilled water systems. Convert everything, including the chillers, to variable flow. That's your pumps, your cooling towers, and your chillers. You want to maximize your delta T on the plant. If you're on a hot day, you're running everything in your plant and throwing everything at the building, and you're running at a 6-degree delta T. That's what we call the low delta T syndrome. And you're not operating optimally. You want to be at least at 10 or 12 degrees delta T in your plant, or you're not operating efficiently. Some hospitals have used their cooling coil condensate for cooling tower makeup, and this is another great way. It saves a lot of water and also reduces the energy use of your chilled water system. So there are lots of opportunities in the cooling plant. If you have constant volume pumps, look at the balancing valves. If they're throttled back, you can have the impellers trimmed and then open up those valves, or just put VFDs in place. If you still have absorption chillers that are not using heat recovery from, say, a CHP plant, then you want to look at converting those, replacing those with electric chillers. Lots and lots of opportunities for the HVAC systems, occupancy settings for individual VAV boxes. Check your building automation system for overridden points. That's one of the first things we do when we do a retro commissioning project. Look for overridden points and schedules. Reset mixed air temperature and discharge air temperatures to reduce reheat. Pressure differential resets on variable air volume systems. Air-to-air heat recovery, which is now a code requirement for a lot of air systems if you're upgrading or replacing systems. So that's something to look out for. Another project that we've implemented in a lot of hospitals is setting back the air change levels in the ORs during an occupancy. And we set those back to about 8 air changes per hour. That's about as low as we can go and still maintain the proper pressurization levels to maintain sterility in the ORs. And we don't set all the ORs back. We leave at least 1 or 2 up for emergencies at all times when we do that. But that's also being implemented more and more across the country. So there's a lot of other things you can do on the HVAC systems. Lots of opportunities on plumbing, variable speed drives on your domestic cold water booster pumps, replacing water-cooled compressors and vacuum pumps, upgrading your elevator controls, and so on. And as we do identify measures across your facility, and you have a whole list of projects you can look at, lighting, pump modifications, variable frequency drives and all that. You'll see that we want to look at those on an individual basis. And then we usually take all the list of measures and rank them by payback. You can see here I'm ranking them in order of ascending payback. And then I have a cumulative table as well. And I can look at the simple payback in aggregate. And so if I want to implement everything with, say, a 6-year aggregate payback, which is about a 16% return on investment, I can get about an 18% reduction in our energy use and costs on that site. Or if the CFO says, you know what, I can give you $500,000, and I can go and look at the cumulative cost. And for $497,000, I got a 4.8-year payback. I will have a total energy use reduction of about 9%. So that's a good way to look at these projects once you get an energy audit done. And we would recommend doing a level 2, ASHRAE level 2 audit to make sure you've adequately scoped out all the projects. We also want to look at embedding the life cycle costing into purchasing policies. And so as you're doing projects, there's big differences in energy and water consumption in various pieces of equipment, process equipment like ice makers and freezers and autoclaves, but also think of things like your chillers. And you want to include the energy and maintenance in the total cost of ownership. So when we do a chiller plant, we bid the chillers directly to the manufacturers, and this is the output of that. Chiller efficiency is based on four things: the motor efficiency, compressor efficiency, the refrigerant, and then the heat transfer surface area. Three of those things are largely fixed for any given chiller size and manufacturer. And so what you're really doing is adding more copper or surface area. And so when we bid the life cycle cost method for the chiller pre-purchase, a company like Trane or Carrier, or they might bid 6 or 8 different selections, adding a little more copper each time, and you look for that sweet spot to get to the most the best purchase option, which is the lowest life cycle cost. And so that's another way you can incorporate life cycle costing into your energy efficiency program. And along those lines, we want to incorporate energy efficiency into our building infrastructure planning, because buildings they're a lot like complex machines, and over time, the parts and pieces, they break down, they wear out, and they need to be replaced. And whenever you're replacing an energy using piece of equipment or a system, this is a big opportunity to exercise a little creative problem solving. And so you don't, if you have an air handler that needs to be replaced, you don't just want to call a contractor and say, that air handler, let's replace it in kind with something of the same type, size, and capacity. That's a missed opportunity. And you can see a lot of that equipment is going to wear out. Air handlers last, interior air handlers last on the order of 20 to 25 years. Boilers and chillers a little longer. But this is you can see the life of the equipment based on a survey that ASHRAE does. So as an example, let's say you need to replace an air handling unit. Traditional design, the old unit, 500 feet per minute on the filters and coil. And we want to go and look at putting in a lower pressure drop units. We're going to size it at 300 feet per minute, or as low as the space allows. So that means we're going to upsize the cross-sectional area of the air handler. So 10,000 CFM unit. The existing unit is 5 feet wide, 4 feet tall. So let's say we make it 6 feet wide and 5.5 feet tall, or in most cases, you need to use the same footprint. And so we keep the 5 feet wide, and instead of 5.5 feet tall, maybe we got to make it 6.5 or 7 feet tall. And in most cases, you can increase the height. You may need to move some ducts and pipes around, but often you can get there. And so the incremental cost difference in doing this is very small. You have a bigger sheet metal box, and the coils and filters, the face areas are a little bit larger, but I might be able to go from an 8-row coil to a 6-row coil. So things like that may trade off. The motors and VFDs get a lot smaller, and I can usually eliminate things like sound attenuators and mist eliminators. And the best thing is it can never be overridden. Savings are there for the life of the air handler, 25 years. So if I do that, and I go from 500 feet per minute down to 300 feet per minute, I go from 7 inches of static down to 4 inches of static pressure. And you can see that I've cut my full speed energy use of the motor by more than half. And so, and when you factor in the utility incentives that you can get for implementing this, you can usually find there's no increase in first cost. We also want to incorporate energy efficiency into the design process for any new buildings, additions, or major renovations. And we want to look at potentially creating some master design standards covering building envelope, lighting and electrical systems, HVAC, plumbing, and temperature controls. And we want to include enhanced commissioning to make sure everything is working properly when we turn the new buildings over. And I would strongly consider deploying a monitoring-based commissioning platform as part of that new building process. And as we build these new buildings or additions, we want to set some ambitious but realistic goals. So maybe for renovations, you want to shoot for maybe being 20% below the International Energy Conservation Code, and new construction 30%, maybe LEED Gold. Those are good good goals that some healthcare systems have embraced for their new construction. And we want to make sure that we're taking advantage of all the grant and rebate opportunities that are available. So ComEd and People's North Shore Gas and NICOR have some rebate and incentive opportunities that can help fund your program. And this could be for energy audits, for retro commissioning and monitoring-based commissioning, prescriptive energy efficiency measures like lighting, variable frequency drives, high efficiency air conditioning equipment like chillers. And they also will fund custom efficiency measures, which are usually system changes like converting an air or water system to variable flow. They'll fund green features in new construction. And even some combined heat and power systems. And we want to look at opportunities wherever possible to get some additional funding for renewables. You know, these programs have been around a long time, and you're paying for these. There are surcharges on your bill, so you're really not getting free money. When you apply and get these funds, you're getting your money, and if you're really aggressive, you're going to get your money that you paid in plus somebody else's money, and that's always kind of nice. But it can be big money. If we do a new chiller plant, we can find money from ComEd anywhere from $200,000 to $300,000 on some projects. So it is significant. And going back to that, at the end, I'm going to give Jim Hauser from Franklin Energy a few moments, if we can, to talk a little bit about the gas company rebate options or incentive options. And also, I know that Peter Locke has presented several times for the HESNI group, and Peter would be another go-to guy on the ComEd side to contact. One of the things that's often overlooked is leveraging recognition opportunities. So ASHRAE's got their E2C program, their Energy to Care program. You've got the LEED, the ASHRAE awards, get an Energy Star label. Practice Green Health has their environmental excellence awards. And what I have found over the years is that getting a couple of high profile awards and getting a lot of recognition for the hospital or healthcare system can really drive momentum. Getting a LEED Gold for a new hospital facility or an Energy Star label, get all sorts of support from the C-suite, and that helps you get more money. And the same goes also for awards from ASHRAE or ASHRAE. Those really help build momentum, and it's all about influencing the C-suite to get support and financial support as well for your program. And finally, we want to also consider some alternative financing options. So energy efficiency has a lot of great reasons to implement it. We talked about many of those, good returns on investment, but it's not your core mission. A lot of times that new chiller that you want to get loses out to renovating a floor or some other purchase of a big piece of medical equipment, things that are core business for the hospital, and that's understandable. And so the traditional path of funding energy efficiency through either operating income or the capital budgeting process, or what I call do it yourself, sometimes doesn't get you to where you want to be. So you want to consider some alternative options. That can be third-party financing with an energy service company or ESCO. A lot of you have heard of energy services agreements or energy efficiency as a service. There's PACE financing, which is available in Illinois, not as applicable for nonprofit hospitals. Most of you, if you pursue renewable energy, you're probably going to evaluate doing that through what's known as a PPA, or power purchase agreement. And then most hospitals or healthcare systems have an endowment fund. And a lot of them have started to set up green revolving funds where you utilize capital from the hospital's endowment fund to finance these projects and then pay back the endowment fund over time. Part of the savings go to replenish the revolving fund, and the other go back to the endowment. And as I mentioned, these are low risk, high return investments. The Sustainable Endowments Institute has shown that the average green revolving fund runs about a 28% ROI, much higher than what any hospital system is getting in their endowment from other investments. So those are all options to consider as you pitch your program up the ladder. So with that, this is my contact information. I appreciate everybody's time. I'm going to open it up. Before I open it up for questions, I wanted to see if we could give a couple of moments here to Jim. I don't know if I can patch you in, Jim. Don, is it possible to have Jim cover? Jim, you need to unmute yourself. There you go.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted.
You are unmuted. Take it away. I'll do the slides for you.
All right, thank you for that, Dan. As anybody who knows Dan, he's a tough act to follow. He's usually the smartest guy in the room, so I'll do the best I can. So quickly, and Dan covered a lot of this already, but as far as the People's Gas Program goes, that's City of Chicago proper. There's another program in NICOR. That's on gas. We all know about ComEd. So the key to this is talk to us first. If you have an idea or you want us to come in and go through just a quick walkthrough, we'll do that with you and look for those low-hanging fruit opportunities that Dan talked about. If you haven't had your steam traps looked at in a number of years, let's get those looked at. So general guideline is prescriptive is a big name for menu. We have a bunch of predefined measures, one-for-one replacements. The replacement is going to be more efficient than what you took out, and we will incentivize you for that. Custom is baseline of what you have now, expected efficiency of what it will be when you replace that system. Maybe it's a burner on a boiler, as an example. You would get $1 per therm saved in the first year. General idea is if it saves gas, we probably have something to give you to help pay for it. Steam traps as an example. If you can put those in-house, in most situations, private and public, we will pay for the survey and pay for most, if not all, of the cost of the traps. I mean, it's, to quote a phrase, it's the biggest no-brainer in the history of Earth. You know, let us pay for them for you. It's your money. You know, I'm paid to be one, find ideas, and also help be a good steward of the money that everybody has paid in. And as Dan said, the only thing better than getting your own money back is using the folks next door that don't participate. So we've got a bucket of money, let's use it. In the private sector, we have two different sectors, private and public. Private is anything that isn't county or state-based. Federal does not count, but county, state-based, municipal. Private sector on custom is $1 per therm saved in the first year as the incentive. On public sector, if you happen to work at a a Stroger or a Provident as an example, a county hospital. A custom project garners a $2.50 per therm save in the first year. We can pay 100% of project costs, and we have lots of times in those situations. The payback window on custom projects is 1 to 7 years. However, we will make an exception on something like a burner as an example. If we know that that has a 20-year product life, and that becomes an 8-year payback or an 8.5-year payback, but it's really good for the hospital to do, we'll typically make an exception. Okay, next slide, Dan.
Oh, not getting it to move. There we go.
There you go. So again, prescriptive is 1-for-1 upgrades with predetermined units, replaces existing equipment and meets the specified requirements on the application. And so what I can do for everyone on the call or everyone for HESNI is you're going to see my email address at the end. You send me an email. I don't think HESNI will send me all of yours, but you send me an email. I'll send you all the applications. We do need pre-approvals on almost all projects over $10,000. Rebates may not exceed 100% of the project cost. So example, we don't let you make money on the rebates. You know, if we would pay up to 300,000, but the project cost is 225, we keep the 75. You don't get to have it. So, but just some pictures of some common things here. Steam trap on the left, a insulated removable jacket on a bonnet for a steam valve that normally is not insulated. We pay huge money for these. They're just as effective as pipe insulation, but they last for 20 years. And when you have to go exercise that valve or change it or fix it, take it off with the Velcro and the rings, put it on the floor, put it back on when you're done. It'll last for 20 years. On the right is a new burner on an older boiler. You know, simple stuff. Let us help you find it. My job is like Dan's. I walk around and look for things. And when we trip, I try not to trip over the easy stuff. We do the easy stuff first, the low-hanging fruit. And then as we build a relationship with you and your folks that hold the purse strings, we build up a list of successes. So when we go ask them for some real money, we can say, hey, we found all this stuff already. It's already paid for. I'm asking you for 100 grand, but we've already saved 100,000. So I'm really not asking you for anything. Next slide, Dan. So as Dan went through some of the typical things, steam trap survey and replacement. If you haven't done it, please, you know, get a hold of me and we'll get those done. Pipe insulation, removable insulated jackets, steam and hot water boiler replacements, you know, often smaller ones. Boiler tune-ups will help you pay for a boiler tune-up every 3 years at your facility. So you ought to be doing them every year anyway. You know that you are doing it. Let us help you pay for it every 3 years. If you have a large kitchen, there's a system to control the ventilation on that, where just like anything else, it doesn't need to be running at 100% speed 24 hours a day. And if yours is, there's a really nice system that can go on there that'll vary the speed of the makeup air and the exhaust. Studies like Grumman Butkus. In fact, Grumman is a partner of the program. So if you come to us and say, we'd like to have a study done on the building, as long as there's budget for it and Grumman can make a good case for it to us, we can pay Grumman directly to do a study for you. Okay. So it's a win-win. It's your money. Again, we'd rather give it to somebody like Dan and his team to find all these opportunities and then let us help you pay for the upgrades. Boiler controls, burner upgrades, you know, O2 trim, building automation system upgrades. It just goes on and on. Just, you know, the key is don't write a PO until you call me first or somebody in the program. And I say that because we have to show influence over the project. So call us first, tell us what you're thinking. I can put in a pre-application so it's identified, and then we can find out if it makes sense. To work with us costs you nothing. To get a rebate approved commits you to nothing. Often, as you all know, a proposal looks better when it has a rebate on it already that somebody else is going to pay for 30% of the project when you go ask for the money. So let us help you with that. Let's see, what do we have next, Dan?
West.
Okay, just an example. Okay, I can't name the hospital, but here's an example that is just, why wouldn't you want to work with us on this? A hospital in the city has 5 boilers. One is for redundancy, one is for expansion. So we couldn't touch those 2, but the other 3 were running the building. We upgraded 3 of the burners from the original, very basic burners to 3 state-of-the-art burners that had the ability to run at 3% O2 with the O2 trim built in. They achieved a 4% reduction in natural gas usage, which ended up being 151,000 therms of natural gas. At $1 a therm, we paid $151,000 out of the $500,000 project cost. Now, that's a whole lot easier to sell than asking for $500,000 when you only have to ask for $350,000. So you understand what I'm saying. The operational savings were over $83,000 a year. And that's every year for the life of that burner. Okay. And again, as Dan said, for the foreseeable future, we're probably going to be looking at increased gas prices. So that value goes up and up. And even when it goes down, you're way ahead of the game. So that's just an excellent example of how we can help you.
Okay.
Next one.
That's just you, Jim.
Just me. So again, jhauser@franklinenergy.com. And the only reason it doesn't say People's Gas is because, little known secret, almost none of the utilities run their own efficiency programs. They hire companies like Franklin Energy to run them. So we've been running this program for over 10 years for People's Gas. If you're in the city of Chicago proper, call my cell phone, email me, say, hey, Jim, I'd like to meet. We can do a Zoom call. I can come for a walkthrough. Let me help you lower fixed costs. As Dan said, at a 5% net operating margin, every dollar that you save in energy efficiency is worth $20 in revenue coming in the front door.
Right.
That is not hard to sell. That makes energy efficiency almost as attractive as a new MRI machine, sometimes more. So that's huge. Last thing, we just did a whole bunch of stuff for Cook County. They saved 800,000 therms of natural gas. At today's prices, that equaled about $560,000 in operational savings per year. Now, if they were an entity that used a net margin, that would be the equivalent of $112 million in offset revenue. So call me. Nobody likes stimulating the economy more than me and getting somebody a PO, but really nobody likes leaving something better than I found it, like Dan does, and make your facility more efficient, lower your emissions, be a good neighbor. You know, we can only help. We can never hurt you.
Thanks, Jim.
You're welcome.
I just want to, as we close out, I want to mention, give equal time for the ComEd side that, again, Peter Locke would be a good contact on the ComEd incentive programs. And I know he's presented. Peter, if you're on here, sorry I didn't get any slides from you ahead of time, but